In Crimea, an FSB dacha where Putin likes to vacation was attacked. At that time, there were high-ranking guests present. The Ukrainian Armed Forces in Donbas destroyed a warehouse containing a huge number of Russian drones. The city attacked an airbase in Crimea and burned the occupiers' aircraft fleet worth tens of millions of dollars. Russia is preparing for war with NATO. Putin's sensational statement shocked everyone. Russians are massively refusing to sign contracts with the army, while the Kremlin is selling weapons to the Italian mafia. An emergency NATO meeting due to Russian fighter jets over Europe. The alliance is preparing a decisive strike. Hello, my name is Yulia Kokan, and right now here are the main stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. Drones, the so-called FSB dacha, where Putin often vacationed. Russian media are reporting on drone attacks on the Foros sanatorium in Crimea. The occupation authorities claim that there were alleged strikes on the territory of the sanatorium, while monitoring channels report that a government building was hit.
12 patients from Foros in Crimea have been hospitalized at the Yalta Medical Center of the FMBA, 4 of them in serious condition. 7 are in moderate condition, according to the center. As a result of the attack on Foros, 3 people were killed. Given that this is an FSB sanatorium and a special event was taking place there at the time of the attack, the identities of the dead and injured are not being disclosed.
The head of Crimea, Aksyonov, also confirmed the attack. It is also known that the Foros restaurant was closed for special service the day before. In addition, according to as yet unconfirmed information, collaborator Salda may have been present at Foros at the time of the attack. It is known that since last night, the Kherson Gauleiter has not been in contact. Meanwhile, in that same Crimea, the so-called sanctions of the Valiant drones are now in effect. Russian propagandists are complaining and lamenting about the shortage of gasoline. At many gas stations, there is no fuel, and where it is available, prices reach 80 to 85 rubles per liter. The average across Russia is 60 to 65. Overall, there are extremely long lines for gasoline. In short, everything feels very much like home. You really don't want to leave at all. Honestly,
I don't want to leave Crimea or Salusta. It's so great here. I have gotten used to living here as if it were my own home. Everything feels so heartfelt, so homely.
In the Kharkiv region, Russian troops are trying to break through to Kupiansk. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War report that the Russians are advancing in several areas at once.
According to analysts, it is likely that the occupiers have captured Kindrashivka to the north of Kupiansk and are trying to use their numerical advantage in infantry to break through Ukrainian defensive lines. The Russians are conducting combat operations mainly on the right bank of the Oskil River, since they are having trouble moving heavy equipment from the left bank.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian Defense Forces destroyed Russian drone and ammunition depots.
On August 29th, the US GV Dnipro forces struck a drone logistics hub, destroying large stockpiles of attack UAVs. And on September 18th, units of the AFU and SPU eliminated a regimental ammunition depot in Luhansk region along with enemy transport vehicles.
And during operations in Russian-occupied Crimea, GUR drones burned, for the first time in history, 2 enemy B-12 Chaika amphibious aircraft and Mi-8 helicopters. It is known that the B-12 Chaika amphibious aircraft are equipped with expensive equipment for detecting and combating submarines. They are, so to speak, actively imposing sanctions against Russians and deploying good drones. This time, the sanctions list includes the oil refinery in Yaroslavl and a substation in Kuban. Meanwhile, Russian FPV drones will soon reach Kyiv. And the deputy commander of the 21st Separate Regiment of Unmanned Systems, Yegor Firsov, says that air defense is powerless against them.
The range at which enemy FPV drones can fly will increase. and Kyiv needs to prepare to intercept FPV drones, against which traditional air defense will be powerless, the military official stated, adding that Patriot systems will not be used to shoot down drones that cost $3,000.
And in fact, confirming Firstov's words, the Russians have already begun to use so-called new types of attacks. Russia is dropping explosives from the sky using quadcopters right onto the streets of Ukrainian cities. Such an attack was recorded for the first time the day before yesterday in Nizhyn. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't do that, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. Remember we told you about the Russian provocation on September 19th? At that time, there were 2 incidents involving Russian aircraft. First, 3 MiG-31 interceptors entered Estonian airspace and remained there for about 12 minutes. Later, Russian fighter jets flew low over a Polish oil platform in the Baltic Sea, violating its security zone. Now the situation is repeating itself. NATO has once again intercepted a Russian military aircraft over the Baltic Sea. On September 21st, 2 German Air Force fighter jets took to the skies to intercept an IL-20 MRF reconnaissance plane that flew over the Baltic Sea, according to decisive, citing the DPA agency. According to the German Air Force, the Russian aircraft ignored attempts to establish communication while flying in international airspace. 2 Eurofighters from the Rostock-Lag Air Base were scrambled for the interception. Meanwhile, Estonia has announced that it is convening a NATO meeting after Russian aircraft violated its airspace. The meeting is expected to take place on September 23rd. This was reported by IRR.
Ambassadors from 32 NATO countries will gather in Brussels on September 23rd at Estonia's request under Article 4 of the Alliance's Charter. This article provides for consultations among allies in the event of a threat to one of its members.
And yesterday, let me remind you, at Estonia's request, an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council was held. This is the first time in Estonia's 34 years of UN membership that the country has officially requested an emergency meeting of the Security Council. For his part, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that Poland, as a NATO member, will not hesitate to shoot down objects that violate its airspace and pose a threat. However, at the same time, it will take a more cautious approach to situations that are less clear-cut. Reuters reports on this.
We will make the decision to shoot down flying objects when they violate our territory and fly over Poland. There can be no discussion about this. But when we are dealing with situations that are not entirely clear-cut, for example, the recent flight of Russian fighter jets over the Petrobaltic platform but without violating our territorial waters, since those are not our territorial waters, requires careful consideration. Before making a decision that could provoke a very sharp phase of the conflict, I also need to be absolutely certain that all our allies will treat this situation the same way we do.
What do you think? Will Russia stop at this? Share your thoughts in the comments. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments for this episode as well which country you're watching from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. Meanwhile, we continue. Now comes the most interesting part. Russia does not plan to stop the war. The Kremlin is planning to intensify offensive operations in Ukraine. This is stated in a report by the Institute for the Study of War. Analysts have noted a report that, starting from July 2025, Russia is forming a strategic reserve from new conscripts.
The Institute for the Study of War recently assessed that Russia's territorial gains from May to August 2025 cost it less compared to the spring of 2025. This is because Russian troops suffered fewer losses per captured square kilometer. The decrease in casualty rates in the summer of 2025 may have convinced the Russian military command that Russia could afford to transfer some new recruits to the strategic reserve while still maintaining the pace of offensive operations on the front lines in Ukraine.
Analysts are confident that the formation of a strategic reserve may indicate that the Russian military command believes their troops will be able to maintain their current pace of advance by using small group tactics, which allow the occupiers to deploy fewer personnel to the front line. The very reports that Russia is creating a strategic reserve indicate that the Kremlin is not interested in ending the war against Ukraine. Moreover, it is possible that preparations are being made for a conflict with NATO. In addition, there have been new statements from Russia's dictator Putin himself. According to him, Russia is ready to respond to any possible threats with military force. The system of agreements between Russia and the US on the control of nuclear and strategic weapons is said to be almost completely destroyed. Moscow declares its intention to deliberately maintain the status quo under the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, whose term expires in February 2026. At the same time, Russia will fulfill its obligations only if Washington does the same.
Russia is capable of responding to any existing or newly emerging threats, responding not just with words, but through the use of military technical measures.
Do you think this is just another nuclear threat, or is it real preparation for a third world war? What is Russia actually planning? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll definitely read them. Russia has developed a plan to interfere in the elections in Moldova, which are scheduled for September 28th. Moscow's efforts will be aimed at disrupting the country's continued course toward joining the European Union, according to Bloomberg. The publication claims that this involves a multi-level strategy approved directly by the Kremlin. The documents state that the goal is to undermine the chances of the party of the country's president, Maya Sandu, the Action and Solidarity Party, in the elections and ultimately remove her from power.
The tactics include recruiting Moldovans abroad, including in Russia, so that they vote at polling stations in the EU and elsewhere, enlisting people to organize disruptive protests, and conducting a broad disinformation campaign on social media. Another main area of President Putin's administration's plans is the use of compromising materials to pressure government officials in order to disrupt the electoral process.
Among Russia's possible plans is also the recruitment of young people from sports clubs and criminal groups to organize violent provocations during voting and protests afterward. What do you think are the chances that Russia will disrupt the elections in Moldova? Share your thoughts in the comments. A predictable sensation: the Kremlin is supplying weapons to the Italian mafia. The facts and evidence of yet another international crime by Putin and his associates have been found and published by the publication L'inchiesta. The Russian authorities are selling firearms from the Tula arms plant to Italian organized crime. All the details are in the report.
Rifles hidden in barrels of oil, Kalashnikov assault rifles with unregistered serial numbers, modern ammunition fresh off the assembly lines of state-owned arms factories. All of this is not from a crime novel, but part of a carefully constructed scheme orchestrated by Russia. According to an investigation by an Italian publication and L'inchiesta, Moscow is centrally supplying weapons to mafia clans, turning organized crime in Europe into an instrument of its geopolitical strategy. I
believe that this is not just about complicity, but about full awareness and political will on the part of the Russian authorities. As we mentioned, the weapons seized in Italy did not have serial numbers. This means that they leave the factories already unmarked, and this is only possible by political order, because having a serial number allows the weapon to be identified, as well as the time of manufacture and the customer. By removing the serial number, they strip the weapon of its passport before releasing it onto the market.
The route and deliveries pass through satellite ports and the northeastern border of Italy. In Catania, in the districts of San Giovanni, Galermo and Librino, there are caches where new weapons are regularly delivered. According to insider information, on the black market, submachine guns and rifles are hidden in barrels of oil. This method not only disguises the smuggling but also prevents corrosion. In the northeast of the country, in Friuli Venezia Giulia, goods are moved across the border in trucks and cars with double bottoms, which are also used to transport drone components.
In fact, the route is mostly the same as those used for transporting fuel, oil and other goods by the Shadow Fleet. Tracking the routes of illegal oil and illegal migration helps to reconstruct the paths used to smuggle weapons from Russia to Italy and other European countries. We were able to identify this in Italy, but it's clear that weapons are also making their way to other European countries.
What is especially alarming is that the mafia clan is forbidden from selling off all the weapons at once. A significant portion is kept hidden in caches as a strategic reserve. The main source of these supplies is, in particular, the Tula arms plant. Europol confirmed this in its 2023 analysis. The appearance of new, unmarked weapons on the market indicates the complicity of certain state structures in fueling the illegal trade. For example, in March 2022, just a few days after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, Italian police discovered in Catania an arsenal linked to the Nisa group of the Santa Paola Ercolano clan. 9 brand-new Kalashnikov assault rifles, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and sniper rifles in perfect condition. The districts of San Giovanni, Negalerma, and Elibrina have turned into hidden warehouses with a constant replenishment of arsenals.
Russia supplies not only the Italian mafia, it also provides weapons to many African regimes. In addition, Russia supports so-called rebels, and now they are no longer just, let's put it this way, fighters against the established authorities in various Latin American countries. This entire endeavor is meticulously orchestrated to destabilize the prevailing situation in numerous regions across the globe. This comprehensive strategy includes substantial and direct financial support for possible right-wing organizations operating within European countries, active support for organized crime syndicates and the mafia, and also significant backing for potential hooligan football organizations, which are themselves frequently and indirectly supported through various public and private organizations that are ultimately financed by influential Russian oligarchs and their extensive networks. In other words, any and all methods of political destabilization that can be effectively activated within the European Union, Russia consistently uses and actively supports.
A member of the Italian parliament, Alberta Losacca, has already responded to the newspaper's publication. She appealed to the country's Minister of the Interior, demanding an urgent clarification of the situation regarding the smuggling of Russian weapons.
The picture painted by the journalistic investigation is alarming. The weapons being sold to criminals are reportedly manufactured at the main, most important state-owned arms factory, where everything takes place under the direct supervision of government authorities in Moscow. Another worrying aspect is that at the seller's request, criminal organizations are allegedly storing part of the military equipment in our country. A stockpile of weapons under Russia's control for purposes that clearly go beyond the mafia and illegal trafficking.
This is a significant political move that Russia undoubtedly needs to strengthen its own negotiating position in crucial talks with the European Union, the United States of America, and various other countries. This is a full-fledged struggle for power in the world. That is, it is about defending its positions. In this way, Russia is defending its interests globally, its interests in Europe.
Italy is just one point on the map. Such weapons depots can at any moment become a lever for Moscow to pressure all of Europe, turning criminal routes into a tool of geopolitical influence and a strategic threat.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Here is this news. French President Emmanuel Macron stated that the use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine is only possible in compliance with international law. The French leader spoke about this in an interview with CBS. According to him, Europe is ready to help Ukraine using frozen Russian assets, but only within the legal framework, regardless of criticism from the Donald Trump administration.
We cannot simply seize these assets from the central bank, even in such a situation. It's a matter of trust, and we must respect international law to avoid chaos.
According to Macron, the funds obtained from the frozen assets are already being used to support Ukraine. But this does not mean that Europe will abandon its commitments to international rules. Regarding the Trump administration's demand to increase pressure on China, Macron noted that Europe has its own strategy for reducing risks in relations with China. But it does not intend to follow a strategy of decoupling.
We have a strategy, but it involves a balanced approach without unreasonable steps or ruptures. Do
you support Macron's position? Let us know in the comments. You couldn't lure people into Putin's army now, not even with millions. Russians are getting smarter and no longer want to fight and die for their dictator's delusions. This is evidenced by the statistics on contract signings for military service. In the second quarter of this year, an unprecedentedly small number of Russians, just under 38,000, expressed a desire to earn money by going to war. This, of course, does not cover the level of losses, since every day the Ukrainian Armed Forces eliminate on average about 1,000 occupiers.
The Kremlin has finally started to choke on the war in Ukraine. For the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, losses in the Russian army have exceeded the number of people willing to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. The rate of recruiting contract soldiers is several times lower than the number of those killed at the front. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation asserts this. The situation across the border is turning extremely negative for Putin.
In the second quarter of 2025, only 37,900 people signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. This is the lowest number in the past 2 years and 2.5 times less than during the same period last year. Andriy Kovalenko is the head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation.
Russia also no longer has enough contract soldiers to even cover its losses at the front. The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation emphasizes that in recent months, the average number of deaths and injuries in the Russian army has exceeded 1,000 people per day. At the same time, according to the General Staff, Russia's losses in this war have already exceeded 1,100,000 soldiers.
There are no longer always enough contract soldiers to cover the Russian army's weekly irrecoverable losses. Andriy Kovalenko is the head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation.
It seems there are fewer and fewer fools willing to join Putin's army. Even the most die-hard Z-patriots understand perfectly well that the road leads only one way. In most Russian cities, cemeteries are overflowing with fresh graves of occupiers who perished in Ukraine. There's nowhere left to bury the Cargo 200. There is a catastrophic shortage of places for the coffins coming back from the front.
People are now having to bury them outside the cemetery gates. They've started some kind of logging here. They also keep burying people in this swamp on loose soil, and there are groundwater levels below.
After seeing all this, no one wants to sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. Even millions of rubles, huge sums by the standards of rural Russia, for joining the ranks of the occupying army no longer work. In the fourth year of the war, no one is rushing to line up at Russian military recruitment offices anymore. As a result, instead of the best, the Russian army is now taking the best of the worst.
Military recruitment officers have to meet their quotas, so if they don't notice certain medical issues or don't want to notice them, they tend to overstate a recruit's fitness category.
To make up for the shortage of cannon fodder at the front, Russian drug addicts, HIV-positive tuberculosis patients, and all kinds of social outcasts are being sent to the front in droves. Some citizens in Russia have built entire businesses around them.
A payment of 40,000 rubles for recruiting someone to the war has started being offered in the Irkutsk region, according to the publication People of Baikal. As stated by the administration in Solsibirsky, a local resident can receive the money if they convince a citizen who has doubts, if they help them make up their mind. It is not necessary to come to the enlistment office with the volunteer. More precisely, it is enough for a local administration employee that, when signing the contract, the recruit writes 2 statements and indicates who convinced him to come. Within 7 days, this social payment will be credited to their account as a volunteer.
However, Russians complain that it's hard to drag anyone into the enlistment offices to sign a contract, even with persuasion. Especially when, at the entrance, you are met by dozens or even hundreds of already maimed soldiers begging the state for the assistance promised by Putin for their injuries.
What they say on TV about helping the wounded, about helping in general, none of that actually happens. You just go from one corridor to another, knocking on different doors, and it's all useless.
All of this completely kills any desire among Russians to go to the front. As a result, military recruiters have to resort to using force, intimidation, and threats against potential recruits.
Very often, unfortunately, we frequently use excessive force when conscripting young draftees into service. I apologize for the unintentional tautology.
But even under the threat of prison or torture, which has recently become a common practice in Russian military enlistment offices, fewer and fewer people are being broken and forced to sign a contract with the army. Analysts say that soon the Putin army will simply choke. Every day it becomes harder for the Kremlin to make up for losses at the front, and as a result, in some areas the enemy has practically left its flanks exposed. Experts are confident that the Ukrainian Armed Forces may take advantage of this in the near future. Meanwhile, the military has already announced a major counteroffensive by the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
Well, once again, Russia has hit a new low. Military-style training, a teacher who's a special military operation veteran, and patriotic upbringing in the spirit of serving the motherland. A cadet class for first graders has appeared in Kursk.
I'm sure that soon Vovka's female classmates will also be able to keep their distance just like him. No doubt about it, the uniform demands it. These boys and girls put on camouflage even before starting school. All of them are graduates of the cadet group from kindergarten. This year, the graduates of the preschool institution came to us as a full group in the first grade.
So it turns out they're preparing kids to die for Putin starting from kindergarten. Total cringe, to say the least.
That's the essence of this long-term project for career orientation according to the scheme. Kindergarten, school, after graduation, a specialized university faculty, initial training at Prodina, and now the middle level.
The whole team will get better. The belt doesn't look left or right, it looks straight ahead at the thigh.
Well, I'm not surprised by what I saw. It's all in the Russian style. Like, if you agree. What do you think of our news? Write to us about what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you!